Okay, I have the absolute privilege to introduce you to Manuel Pais. Pais? Have I got that right? Pais. Pais? Okay. So one of the books that I have most consistently recommended to people in any role in technology read is Team Topologies, and we are so lucky to have one of the authors come and share his insights with us today. Let's get a show of hands. Who in this room has read Team Topologies? Okay, it's not everybody. So those of you who didn't raise your hand, cannot recommend it enough. Read that book. It gives us an incredibly powerful shared language to talk about organization design for flow, which is what we are all about here. We are almost there. I was not prepared to fill for this long. Maybe I'll sing to you. No, I won't sing to you. Manuel is up on the stage. Please give him a huge round of applause. I'm really looking forward to this talk.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I won't sing either, I promise. It's really great to be here. DevOps Days 15th anniversary. I have a DevOps Days Kiel 2016 to show that I was there. That was one of my first public talks. I have some older DevOps Days shirts, but they don't fit me anymore. I think it's too much beer, probably. But it's really great to be here. And as Hannah mentioned, we published the book Team Topologies about 5 years ago, so it's our 5-year anniversary. So please call me. Thank you. Call me again in 10 years, so there will be 25th anniversary of DevOps Days and 15th anniversary of Team Topologies. If you haven't read the book, that's fine. You'll get some insights on the book from this talk, but that's not really, I'm not here to sell you the book. The book actually is called, or is subtitled, Organizing Business and Technology Teams for Fast Flow. So it's, obviously Steve talked about flow as well a bit. So what do we mean by fast flow, right? It's sort of not totally clear what is that definition. So for us in the book, it's a safe, rapid flow of changes to our services. So 5 years later, we realized maybe we should have been a bit more explicit what we mean about that. Because obviously you can look at this and think of, okay, the faster we can deliver new features, then the better, right? But that's not really the point. We need to understand, are these features actually providing value to the customers and to the business? Are they being used? And so a better definition, I would say today, it's a safe, rapid flow of value to our customers, right? That gets closer to what we're really talking about, which implies that we need feedback loops, right? We're not going to know if what we're delivering is actually helpful, valuable, until we get the feedback from usage, from customer feedback, and all that we should be having in place. And then it also gets more interesting because you don't have only one, usually you don't have only one type of customer, right? You have multiple customers, multiple products, etc. So it's actually fast flow in an organization is about how can we have multiple ongoing streams of value to customers in a safe, rapid way, right? And this is where it gets interesting because it seems sort of obvious, this is what we want to do, but the way we think about organizing and how teams are structured and dependencies between teams typically goes against this objective of multiple parallel streams of value. So what are those things that prevent fast flow, right? What are the blockers? Some of them I call the classics in the sense that we already talked about them in the book 5 years ago, and they're pretty much still there. Different things that cause organizations to not be able to achieve this faster flow, this faster pace. And so I'll go through a few of them. One that the symptom is that we have customers coming to us and like, we need this new operating model with Team Topologies in place in 3 months. Because whatever, we have a new CTO and they want to show in 3 months that they've done this great work, or because the company is being acquired and they want to show that they are using sort of the latest trends and stuff like that. The problem with this is that you're basically trying to do a large reorg towards a sort of idealized end state. I think we've all been there. Well, we just do this agile transformation or DevOps transformation for 12, 18 months, and then everything will be magically much better, right? And so it doesn't really work like that, because it's a big change, and change doesn't work like that. It's a little bit like saying, oh yeah, if we could just rewrite the whole system, everything would be better, right? All the technical debt would go away, and the system would be wonderful with a great architecture. Again, we all know that's not how it works. What we need instead is small changes, even at the organizational structure level, right? If we're changing teams, if we're changing responsibilities, ideally we should do that in small batch changes, right? That we can actually learn and get the feedback. Well, did this help? Do we have less dependencies? Are we getting faster flow of value? Do we have the ability to validate if what we're delivering provides value or not? All these things require small changes and feedback, and then we can learn if this is actually helpful or not. So I talk about this continuous organizational evolution, right? A little bit like continuous delivery. We want to make small changes very frequently. Another one that I see is, okay, we have this hiring freeze, but we still need to grow the revenue. So, and often also sometimes we're doing layoffs and we still want to grow revenue. So if you're asking teams to do more things with less people and everything else stays the same, that's a recipe for success, right? No, it's a recipe for disaster. So when you're doing this, I had an example where I was talking to a team, and basically they started as a team focused on end customers, on paying customers, so they were building some service that their end customers would use. And then at some point they started providing sort of internal data-related service to other teams in the company. And then they also built this little sort of complicated subsystem component that other teams were using. And so basically they were all over the place, right? And this happens very frequently, where teams are pulled in many directions. We do this for these customers and this for that customer, and so on. So from a team topology's perspective, that means we have 4 types of teams that we talk about, and ideally we would want teams to sort of be mostly identified with one of these types, right? And so this team was basically a streamlined team because they were providing a service to the end customers, the paying customers. They were a sort of mini platform team with a complicated subsystem, and they were sort of a mini complicated subsystem team as well, right? So there were basically 3 types of teams in one. That's not going to work very well. So what do we need to do instead? Well, when you're trying to produce more value and you don't have more people, you don't have more capacity, what you need to do is really focus on your value streams. What are the things that are really valuable to our customers and to the organization, and make hard decisions. Okay, what do we need to stop doing? We cannot continue doing this internal services or some product that is not really profitable. Whatever it might be, we need to make those difficult decisions, right? Typically at the management leadership level. And then we can realign the teams to have clear responsibilities and clear focus. Okay, your focus is on this type of product or service for paying customers, or your focus is to increase the productivity of our internal teams by providing a good, easy-to-use platform type of service, right? That's what we should be doing. So those are some of the things we still see again and again. And what's interesting for me is that there's sort of what I call new kids on the block in terms of blockers to fast flow. And some of them are sort of accidental from the book in a way. So one that's interesting is sometimes people or teams saying we can't learn new skills because our cognitive load is maxed out, right? Which is interesting because we introduced this idea that there is a team cognitive load. Cognitive load is coming from a field of psychology. It was sort of research at the individual level, but as a team, we are a group of individuals that has a limit on our capacity to take on new knowledge, new ways of working, etc. And so it turns out some people sort of use this as a reason that we are not learning new things because our cognitive load is too high. That was not the point of team cognitive load. The point is that if you need to learn new things, new skills, or change the way you work to improve, to provide better value, we need to do those things, even if they are going to increase cognitive load, right? And then we need to look at how do we then reduce other parts of the cognitive load that maybe we can have internal platforms or automation or some things that can help us sort of reduce that load on other things. So the idea is that cognitive load should not be a blocker to fast flow. If we need to learn new things, if we need to change how we work or understand a new domain, that's something we need to do because that's going to provide value. We need to look at cognitive load then as a constraint. So I hope people remember this movie, Karate Kid. Otherwise, I'm going to feel very old. The first one, which is the good one, right? I think of cognitive load like that. You add cognitive load when you need to do new things, when you need to learn, and then you take off cognitive load by looking at what are the things that we can actually offload maybe to a platform, to automation, what have you. So we should look at cognitive loads more as a constraint of fast flow. We want to achieve faster flow. If we're overloading teams, we need to figure out how we're going to be able to help them. Another sort of new blocker that I see is that, and maybe it's not that new, but everything is service that is easy to use and to consume, right? That's what leadership and management wants to see. Like, we are making these wonderful diagrams, and whether we're talking about services to paying customers or internal services like a platform, everything we wanted to get to this X as a service approach, right? And we sort of set this expectation that all the services, we know what they should do, and they're stable, and once we get there, if we just build it, then things will be, running like business as usual, right? We don't have to worry. When in fact, that's really not true. Most of the time, we build services that will need to change, some more frequently than others. But even if you have a very mature service, let's say you have an infrastructure provisioning service in your platform, it might be quite mature, but at some point in 3 months or 6 months, someone will come and say, we have a different requirement for this service, or the performance is not as good as it should be. There will be some trigger to change, right? So it's better to be aware that even if we're building internal services for our teams, we should not assume they're going to be ready and we can just maintain them and everything's fine. And so from the team topology's perspective, what this means is that we should be intentionally expecting, especially platform teams, to sort of go through these 3 interaction modes. So these are the team interaction modes. It means we should be more intentional about how teams need to interact with each other, right? Whether it's collaboration to discover some new ways of doing things, X as a service, like providing a service that others consume, or facilitating, which is more like helping other teams learn new skills and understand better what they need to do. So that's one of the blockers that I see, that expecting everything to go there in the middle, everything is X as a service, so everything's fine. And then the teams that are trying to use the service are sort of having the problems and having to do workarounds and all that kind of issues. So we should instead expect most services to be sort of in flux, right? Even if you say this service can be consumed by others sort of independently, you should expect that to be temporary. At some point, that service is going to need to be changed again. So you need to go into collaboration mode with some of the teams that need changes to that service. In a way, this goes back to the principles of agile, embrace uncertainty, and don't expect that even if you have internal services that they're going to be there forever, static. Another one that I see, which is interesting, is people saying we're compliant with Conway's Law. So Conway's Law is this idea that the way you organize teams and how they communicate has a very strong influence on the actual systems that you're able to build and the design of those systems, right? Michael Nygaard, who wrote the Release It book, says when you ship a product, you're shipping the organizational structure inside the product. So it's kind of a way to see it. And so I hear this a few times, and I think it's because people probably only heard about Conway's Law, but they didn't really read the book or pay a bit more attention to what fast flow means. So imagine that you have in your organization or part of the organization, you have this nice architecture with microservices. Each microservices even has their own data storage and all that. So great. And then you look at the teams, and according to Conway's Law, or you're following Conway's Law, and like the teams are aligned to those microservices, right? That's great, but if then, when you need to actually provide value, let's say you're building some sort of interesting feature for your customers, if you still need to get all these teams together and have a coordination, have a project to get all the little changes to the microservices, then you're not really getting to fast flow, right? These teams might be able to work independently, but then they cannot deliver value independently to your customers, to the organization. So there is sort of a third part of Conway's Law, which is the business value stream alignment, right? I don't know if people are familiar with John Smart, who wrote the book Sooner, Safer, Happier. He talks a lot about that as well, right? Conway's Law talks about organizational structures should be aligned with your system architecture, but there's this third part sort of implicit, and the architecture should be aligned to your value streams. So they should be sort of decoupled to a large extent so that we can work on the different value streams in parallel. And by the way, an interesting thing as well is people say that team topologies says you have to use microservices. I don't know where that is written in the book. It's just an example. You can have whatever architecture. The point of Conway's Law is that if you try to create an architecture that's very different from your organization of your teams, you're going to have a hard time to get there, right? So if we align the two things, it's going to be easier to achieve that architecture, but then the architecture needs to be aligned with the business value streams as well. So before I leave, and even if you don't remember any of what I said until now, I would like you to remember this quote from Adrian Cockcroft. So he worked for many years at AWS, Netflix, eBay. He's really amazing. And so he said in a tweet or on a Mastodon I don't know how you call it, I think this really gets to the point of kind of change in mentality when we want to achieve fast flow with those multiple ongoing streams of value delivered by sort of autonomous teams to a large extent. So he's saying the work is delivered in many small changes that are uncoordinated to enable flow, which also means that we shouldn't expect to have everything synchronized. We should expect we have different flows, different streams happening at the same time. And management's job is to provide context, prioritization, and to coordinate across teams when needed. And he says this works well with a high-trust culture. So I think this is brilliant. It's sort of very different approach to think about the work versus, top-down command and control, where we know exactly what each team is working on and how they depend on each other. That's great, but then you're going to be going quite slow, right? If you want fast flow, you need to have this change in your culture as well, that it's okay to have multiple teams working in parallel, and there might be some level of duplication sometimes in what they're doing because we want to achieve fast flow. So it's almost like a eventual consistency type of approach. We know we'll get to a point where we can reduce duplication and maybe deprioritize some work that actually is not as valuable. but we allow teams to work in parallel and value streams to evolve in parallel so we can get to fast flow and achieve value faster to our customers and to the organization. That's it. I hope it was helpful, and I'll be around and happy to chat with anyone who wants to discuss these ideas. Thank you so much.